unexpected, very, very dangerous.
Get these spidey sense, I was like, oh, something's off.
And I'm just like, man, I'm waiting to hear something,
Get that crowd warmed up. Is Mr. Jehovah Tiger.
What's going on, y'all? And welcome to a live edition of the Warcry podcast. I had to break out a live stream new in this new house here in the Tulsa area. I can't give y'all the town. Can't have y'all coming up spooking me out. It's 8:30 Central Standard Time. We are getting dark. I said on the last episode, and this episode will be on the podcast too as well. So if you hear this and you're like, man, this guy's talking like he's live or something. I'm live, but you're gonna hear this on the back end too as well. So, but it's sun's going down, and on the last episode, I got a little spooked out. I got a little freaked out, and I was sitting my back facing the kitchen, and then the kitchen goes into a laundry room, and then into another bathroom. And I heard the door close, and I was like, I don't think I'm gonna do that again tonight or today. I guess it's still daylight. But if something comes up behind me, y'all gonna know I'm gonna be getting spooked out. But this is creepy part 6. We are making our way up to the 10th edition. I always set milestones for myself in the podcast, and one thing that I always try to do, and I'm trying to be good about it, because sometimes I want to hop over here to conspiracy, I want to hop over here to stories, I want to do this, but I like to have things linear. So if you haven't listened to the previous 5 installments, I have a compilation here on YouTube. Go check it out. You may like it, you may not like it. No, but you'll like it. There's a lot of creepy stories. One of them, as we're kind of backtracking on, before we hit the new stories, one thing that I think creeps me out is the unknown. And, I had somebody else reach out to me about doppelganger out of Tahlequah. Uh, it was, that phenomenon to me is just so, I don't really know. I really don't know what's going on with that. But, a family member of his saw him running around. He said he used to run around a bunch when he was young. But his family member said, hey, I saw you over there. And, he was telling me that the family member pointed out exactly what he was wearing that night. And he was like, man, I don't know. That's kind of creepy. But that doppelganger thing is just odd to me. I always ask people in my comings and goings about doppelgangers, and I haven't really heard a lot about it. But I don't know if that's a German descent thing. I don't know, uh, but it's definitely interesting. On a previous episode of This Is Creepy, another story that or another topic that sticks out to mind is the story that was told, and he wanted to remain anonymous, about an IHS hospital, in where I'm from. I'll let you do the connecting. Where I'm from, if you heard me talk a lot, you know where I'm originally from, and the people that were passing away were seeing a little boy, and we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. We're going to discuss those. We'll deep dive into some another story that I had gotten from a nursing home, or what do they call that? I don't know what they call it now. Life. I was gonna say life development, but hey, it's the life has been developed. but yeah, we got another a story revolving a nursing home, and tonight we got we got a couple stories from Bigfoot Crossroads host Matt Knapp. He uh he sent me two very good stories, very keen stories, sharp to the touch on the stories. Um, I was talking to a former, well, he's about to be former prison guard out of New Jersey. He was telling me his haunted prison in New Jersey. So that's another one that we got coming up. And then I got a Bigfoot story. A man and his uncle, where he was a boy at the time, encountered a Bigfoot, and he goes through kind of what happened. And but we got a lot to talk about. And if you're listening to this live or even after the fact, send me a story or let me know in the comments if you got a story, and you can send those to realwarcrypod@gmail.com, or you can send those to Yahola Tiger on Facebook. Message me. We're not friends. If we ain't got no friends in common, that'll be sent to the message request, and I'll see that. But to those of you, I apologize. I'm not the best. I got a lot going on, but at replying, but I will eventually. 10 years from now. No, but so let's go ahead and let's get to the news stories here. This one is fresh out of Kenwood. This happened a couple months ago uh, to a gentleman in Kenwood. He sent me a few stories. He's the one that this gentleman is the one that reminded me of Louis Jackson's story and how that played out. Oh man, that's the ice machine. That got me. I almost had me. I'm starting to get a little spooked out. So he writes to me. Here's a fresh one that happened a couple weeks ago. A cousin and her family were playing outside when it started to get dark. They started taking their children inside the house. The husband went out to get the last little boy who was playing with the dog. When he got back out there, he couldn't find the boy or the dog. So he goes back into the house and tells the wife he can't find this little boy or this dog. So they start looking down the road. Um, you go down to neighbors, and no one is home. So she starts walking back, and she's yelling the boy's name. And all of a sudden, she hears him yelling, "Mom, mom, mom." The husband comes up to her, with the other ones, and she tells him, "I can hear him. He's calling for me." So he asks, "What's wrong with her?" And she had turned pale because she didn't know, but she could hear someone whispering Cherokee to her, and they were giving her a word. And she doesn't remember the word now, but they were giving her a word. And she said the word, and the third time she said it, the boy and the dog come walking out from behind the stump. And they couldn't find out. They couldn't figure out why. They couldn't see the boy or the dog behind the stump. But I told my relative that if you're around there to watch, her little, her daughter, and I told her don't be scared, but respect them. He says, I believe it was LP, and that's over there by Kenwood is where he's telling the story from. And he was telling me there's a lot of construction going on over there. I know they just got a brand new facility over in Kenwood, which is desperately needed. But they said that there was a lot of construction going on out there, and they never really, they kind of were maybe thinking that that was causing them to be unrested, but the LP to be unsettled. But he thinks that's what may what may have been causing that. But there's so many stories as I've grown up. I've told my stories on the early years about being out at Merle Home Park and getting kind of taken away for a minute, and then realizing I'm not where I'm supposed to be, and then kind of trying to head back. And and there's always been stories to and from, coming and going, about different these beings taking people. Famous story, and I've heard this a few times, and I've heard it in different ways. Now I'm not exactly sure what you know exactly what is going on with the story, or like exactly what the full, but this has been in a book as well. that basically they took this man away and they did some things and they were able to enter a cave that had a bunch of snakes, and he ended up being with the LP for a while, and he comes back and he was they say he was missing for a while. Excuse me. Dang. Uh-oh. Getting it's starting to hit me. No. But that happens though. And those stories are widely well known. There was a story, and I can't remember exactly all the details, but my grandpa always told me a story about how him and his either brother or a relative of theirs had some dealings with the LP, and they went missing for a while, and they couldn't find him. He was gone for a while, and then he ended up coming back. But one thing about the story that this gentleman from Kenwood told me, one thing that I find very interesting is the Cherokee word that was said. I wish she could have remembered that. That's very interesting because sometimes they play those games and they play they kind of trick a little bit, and they always say with LP that there's good and there's bad, and that's with anything. But they always say that there's good and there's bad, and they did appearances and whatnot. But um, and by LP, I don't want to say it. It's getting dark, but it's what they refer to people with dwarfism now is what a LP is. I don't want to say it. It's getting dark out here, but they always say that they do play those tricks and they do lead you off. And I had another relative tell me about that they think that they're, and this is kind of interesting too, that like the LP is what like the Europeans call fairies, and those fairies can basically shrink landmass. Like they can basically, it's like crumpling up a piece of paper and drilling a hole through the paper, and then you end up on the other side of the paper, or whatever. And that's really time, or landmass or distance or whatever you want to call it. But they have the ability to do that. I was told that, and I find that interesting. Because we always talk about missing 411, and I had a few people comment over the course of the last couple weeks about missing 411, and I find it very interesting that they can't explain anything. I listened to another podcast that they were talking, oh, it's the smiley face killers. It's got to be. There's a syndicate of people who are trying to, take people for whatever reason for their own enjoyment, and that doesn't make sense to me. Um, but I believe, and I believe that it is LP that's taking these people, and it doesn't always show up as Native American or Indian, you know, LP, but it shows up as whatever those people see. Because a lot of people that are taken are German, which I find that very interesting too. But I appreciate him sending that story in. That's a very keen story, especially saying that word and the child appearing from the stump. That's very interesting. Next story that I'm going to tell is from Matthew Knapp from Bigfoot Crossroads. Um, his story goes: in 1999, I had a freak accident that I ended up in the ICU in the hospital for 2 weeks. The first night I was there, a male nurse spoke to my mom while I was in the emergency room. He was just telling her not to worry and I was going to be fine. Later on during my stay, my mom had spoken with him a couple times and mentioned how nice he had been and that she would like to thank him before I got out of the hospital. And there was a couple times he came in my room in the middle of the night to check on me to make sure I was doing okay. When I was leaving the ICU, we were talking to the head nurse of that department and asking about this male nurse and who he was. And one distinct thing about him was that he was always, or he always had a shell necklace on, like one of those little seashells. After talking with the head nurse and another nurse who was escorting me to my hospital room, this guy doesn't exist, and nobody matching his description works at the hospital, and certainly not in the ICU or the emergency room. Man, golly, imagine that, man. You just had a traumatic event, and then now you're getting hit and with another traumatic event. Like you don't know who this person is. Like that's one thing too that there's a story that's I'm going to tell tonight too as well. Um, that is dealing with a kind of angel. I got a couple angel stories. That might be an angel, may not be an angel. I don't know, but it was just very weird. But that story there, kind of gave me goosebumps because I think about those stories of like, man, maybe that was just like a guardian angel. Maybe that was somebody that was coming, from the other realm. I don't know, from the heavens or whatever. Just checking on you, making sure, letting you know, hey, everything's gonna be all right. It's not your time. Next story, once again from Mr. Matthew Knapp from Bigfoot Crossroads. Um, it's same hospital. My great grandmother was in the hospital, and down the hall from her room was a waiting area off to the side, a small one with a couple chairs and a coffee machine. My uncle, who's well known in Tahlequah, had gone to get a cup of coffee. He walked into the room, and there was an older man sitting in one of the chairs wearing a hospital gown, and had this kind of this sort of depressed, blank look on his face. My uncle was always outgoing, and so he said hello to the man and asked him if he wanted a cup of coffee, and the man replied, "No, I'm okay." My uncle makes his cup of coffee and walks out. Right as he walked out, he remembered to grab creamer or sugar or something of that to make his coffee better. And when he turned around and went back into the room, the man was gone. Both of those instances took place at an old doctor's hospital on 25th and Harvard in Tulsa. The hospital was bought out and eventually shut down, and now sits empty. Local kids break in every now and then to look for ghosts, but I haven't heard any local lore about it. Man, that's one thing about stories like that. Like those two. Shout out to Matthew Knapp from Bigfoot Crossroads. Go subscribe to him. Um, but man, this gave me kind of goosebumps because it's like, golly, like we don't know who that is, and to me those are the best. Those are like my favorite. Like when people send me stories, it's like, yeah, I really don't know what it was. Like who that was, but they were there and they disappeared, and they're like nowhere to be found. Dang, I got goosebumps, Matt. Appreciate you, man. Thank you for sending those in. You know, I told a story, and I'm almost hesitant to tell this story because it makes me a little bit nervous. And I've always teased people about this story. Um, it's about the Tulsa sewers and the tunnels that go all through Tulsa. And people want to talk about the downtown Tulsa or the downtown tunnels, and you know, yeah, maybe that's connected. And I don't know, but the hospital on 25th and Harvard is very close to the hospital or the girls' home that was out there, and kind of I'd say Midtown, um, you know, like 41st North from Sheridan over. And so for those of you that are in Tulsa or know Tulsa, you'll know that area. And there's a big old park out kind of in that area that has a bunch of tunnels that go who knows where, but they're really storm drains, but they're big like man size. But that's a very interesting story, about different hospitals. And speaking of uh, hospitals, um, the next story, like my segue there, just a nice little segue, is the haunted nursing home. Now, technically, there's two. One of them's in Chakota, Oklahoma, and another one is in Jinx, Oklahoma. And this person told me, I've worked at multiple nursing homes in my time. The first one I worked at was a nursing home in Chakota, Oklahoma. And you want to talk about creepy? That place was so creepy at night. We as nurses and CNAs hated working overnight. It was always something going bump in the night. Well, one night I was making late rounds, and out at the end of the hall, I could see something darker than the room, standing in the corner at the end of the hall next to the door. It was tall and kind of looked like it had a hat. and it would go from room to room every time we saw it. There were spirits all in that place and not good ones. The second nursing home I've worked at was a nursing home in Jinx, Oklahoma. When you were talking about residents or patients seeing a young boy or young child and then die, we've had multiple residents make those claims too. They would see a young boy and say he was so nice and kind, but I think that that's death coming for them, and it's coming in a way that wouldn't scare them. We also heard them talk about family members coming to see them too, like the resident would pass later on as well. Working in a nursing home is sad because a lot of people go there to die. We try our best to do what we can with what we have. Man, yeah, those stories, and she kind of went into more detail um, as I kind of asked questions. People just tell me the initial story, and then I kind of ask questions afterwards. It's kind of how I operate. But one thing about that place in Shakota is I asked her about the Hat Man, the shadow person thing, and she kind of looked at me and was like, yeah, I don't know, because this shadow would basically bounce. When they would walk, make their rounds, it would go from room to room. Like they would see it, and then it would just go into a room, and it would essentially whatever they did. And then, one time they said they went in there and it was standing in the corner of one of the patient's rooms. And I was like, oh God. I said, what did you do? She said, we walked away. And she said that there was a security guard there, that was like a part time guy that was only there in certain evenings, I guess, or whatever. And she was like, yeah. Like we went down there one time and he was like, yeah, there's something here. Like, I'm good. I mean, that to me, that's another scary thing because we don't know what that is. Is it death? Is it, I don't, I mean, a demon or whatever it could be. Um, but she said that she would see that thing going from like a room, like it'd go into a room, they'd look, nothing's there. They'd go back and they'd see it again and go into another room. And so this thing is like frequent. Like this was like almost a nightly thing is kind of what it made it sound like. And that's one thing about when I'm not gonna hate on anybody who's got family members in a nursing home, but sometimes them people that would get put in them nursing homes ain't the best people. Like they kind of mean, or they kind of salty, or they was running wild in their younger years, and sometimes they got bad energy and they just want to bring that and they die, and then now the energy's just frothing, frothing. That's a crazy word. That it's just ruminating in that place, and that's what kind of sounds like in that nursing home out there in Shakota. If you work in a nursing home or been around someone who works in a nursing home, does that thing? If you're out there and you're listening, does that any of that stuff follow you home, or you're like, man, that's kind of creepy? Because that reminds me of After Walker Paranormal interview that I did with those folks, and they were saying that they had like a caretaker spirit that would just stand or sit or poke its head out from the doorway. I'm good, but for those of you guys, hopping in and out, let me know where you're from, um, and like and subscribe and share if you guys like, especially if you're listening to this on the back end. My goal is to get to 1,000 before the first episode, or not first episode, the 2 year anniversary and the 100th episode. I'm trying my best, so uh, but like, share, subscribe, do what you guys do. I don't really do a lot. I mean, I just do post episodes, and if you guys like it, you like it, but I thought I'd do something kind of easy this time. I can talk live, and also too, if you got a story and you want to share it, I'm gonna actually, speaking this right now. I'm going to drop the link. I'm going to drop the link in the chat. If you got a story, you want to come in and share it. It could be about anything creepy, ghosts. This is no holds barred, though. But there's a link in the chat. For those of you guys listening on the back end, shoot me a message, Yehola Tiger, on Facebook, or email me, realwarcrypod@gmail.com. That's another another place that you can get a hold of me. Um, but we got a lot of haunted places on this episode. I mentioned at the very beginning, I talked about a haunted prison. And this story, it was really sad. I was really, really sad about this after I was told this because I'm like, man, like, it brings back memory or like not memories, but brings back like like thoughts of like these young guys committing crimes, and then they're in here with serial offenders and in prison, and and they don't cut it, and they end up something bad happening to them, and it's just a sad world. But this story comes out of um, New Jersey, um, and it's from a prison guard out that way. And his story goes, "I'm a prison guard in a prison in New Jersey. You want to talk about wild? It's wild in here. I would almost say it's like a jungle with the amount of dangerous people in this place. I never experienced anything creepy in my life until there was this young guy, and he was murdered in his cell. I don't really know what exactly he did, but all I know is you know, they murdered him. They killed him. The other inmates, not trying to get caught, stuffed his body under the beds and hid him so that they wouldn't get more time for the murder. But we eventually found him. It's just a poor guy. It was sad that they had to do him like that. But I'm telling you, this place is no joke when it comes to violence. After we found the kid, weird things started happening in the cell block. We would hear faint moaning like somebody was trying to scream. One night, I'm sitting at post and I keep hearing knocking on the door. And I look out and there's nothing. No one. Everyone's in their bunks or in their cells for the night. And so I sat back and the knocking started again. And I looked and there was no one there. And then I thought about the young guy and I said out loud, "If it's you, knock again." Sure enough, he knocked again. Man, I got goosebumps on that one. Man, that's one thing I feel terrible about that because like I said, who knows what he did, you know, new young guy coming in, and the old heads, they want to be respected in a certain way. So it was just real sad, that story, but yeah. He was also telling me too that he had a buddy of his, and like I said, I don't know exactly where Bill Cosby was, but his buddy was like, "Yo, I got Bill Cosby." I think his buddy was in New York, maybe. He was like, "Yo, I got Bill Cosby. I got Bill Cosby. He's in protective custody right now. We got to make sure, he was really excited to have Bill Cosby, which is kind of crazy to say that he knew somebody who was protecting Bill Cosby in prison, when he was in there. Um, but it's getting dark out here. If you're listening to this, after the fact, and you're like, "I like to listen to spooky things," I wouldn't, because I'm sitting here and it's like the sun's going down. I'm starting to get a little spooked out. The backyard and the trees start to make like a almost like a hand reaching out. But we're gonna keep it moving. If you guys said, I dropped the link in the chat. If you want to come in, tell a quick story, or you got something about the previous stories that you guys want to talk about, feel free. Um, but we're gonna keep this thing rolling with all these stories. I got a few more to tell. So I was talking to somebody out of Weleetka, Oklahoma. This is kind of in the middle of nowhere. Growing up in Weleetka, Oklahoma was kind of rough, but we made it. I always thought it was so creepy out there. We would run around when we were younger. We swam in creeks, walked in and out of the woods, walked the dirt roads at night. Well, one night we were swimming in a creek, and the water was up just a little higher, so we could go under the water. Well, my friend went under, and when they came back up, there was this man standing above them. He was known in that area. People always knew he was kind of spooky. He knew things, and but I personally thought he was a shapeshifter. So we ran out of the creek and went home. And then another night, this is crazy. I don't know why we was walking late at night. We were walking home, and we had seen him standing in the middle of the road, and he looked at us and went into the woods next to the road. As we were walking by, a dog came out. I always got that creepy feeling about him. And I believe that when he walked in there, he came out a dog and he wanted to follow us and see what we were up to, so late at night. But yeah, that's a good story. I don't know if he was or if he wasn't. Those old timers, you just never knew. They you had to kind of keep that in the tuck because you just never know who's out there and can do things. And but that's alleged shapeshifter in Weleetka, Oklahoma. And I don't know in that area. I'm not really familiar with Weleetka, the town, so much, or even really that area. I'm kind of more northeast. But they always said, or she was telling me about. I guess I need to look this up, but I think that some type of really big crime happened there, like maybe in the '80s or something. Um, but she was telling me about that, and then how that she knew people that that houses got burned down randomly, and she kind of had some crazy stories. And I was like, man, I'll tell that one because that one she could kind of linear follow because she would always say that this guy he was always around. Like they would be doing something and he was always around. And like the two times that she saw him and she thought that he could kind of like shift, I guess you could say. But she was real nervous about that. And he walked in and they walked by and a dog came out. In that area, man, I had a story growing up when they would my grandpa would tell me about my aunt, my great aunt. When they was little, they was out there playing and all of a sudden they see this dog come up. This real pretty dog. Like, what is whose dog is this? And they're petting and they're loving on it real good. And that dog smiled and it had and that dog had a gold tooth or silver tooth. Then they say, "Oh, y'all need to get out of here, get out of here." He's shooing him off because you never know who that could be. Um, Rich in the chat, hey, I love your podcast. Howdy from New Jersey. Hey, Rich. I just told a story just now about a haunted prison in New Jersey. So you might know that prison. I'm not exactly sure, but going back to the kind of shapeshifter, there's always so much. I get asked this all the time, and not all the time, but people ask me about what's the difference between Dogman and shapeshifter. Or is Dogman a shapeshifter, or this and that? And my opinion is I think that they're two separate things, but I also think that what people are seeing, especially a story that I heard from I can't remember the name of the podcast. Brandon from Tinfoil Tales. He had I had listened to his story, and one thing that to me is an indicator on if something is it's getting dark in here, y'all. Turn the light, yeah. Yeah, it's getting dark in here. Uh I was getting kind of spooked out in here. I had to turn the light on. But like an encounter that he had, it seemed like this thing was kind of not taunting him or not really, but it seemed like to me that it was making sure that it was known. Like it was making sure that it was like it that he saw it, like whatever this was. And I think when people see this thing, I don't really think when they see it out in the wild or like in the forest, I believe that it's like an actual probably dog man or something, whatever it's called, werewolf or whatever. But one thing, um, but one thing that I think that's very, to me, is very key when someone tells me a story that they see something is if you're somewhere where you're like, where there's like, hey, there's not a lot of woods here. Like there's a story told to me out of Oklahoma City, and this woman was seeing this dog man type creature in her window. And one thing that I don't know, like I said, I'm not an expert on dog man, but it just doesn't seem right for that thing to target somebody like that. Like it has some type of will or some type of thought process on, man, this, I can mess with this person and not ever do anything to them. It just doesn't make sense. And I'm also wondering too, and maybe, people don't really know who they cross sometimes. I'm always trying to be not crossing people in a bad way. I always try to be respectful to people. I always try to do my best on that stuff. And, but sometimes you just don't really get along with people, maybe. I'm not really sure. But sometimes people can go after people in that realm. And it's not always, I always talk about native stuff, but they talk about that in Mexican culture. They talk about that in I don't know, I spoke like when I talked with Mac Nez, Kevin Nez, when I was telling him that story about that CIA agent seeing some type of beast or shapeshifter type thing, in his in the cabin up there. So, it could be really anything, but I don't know. The werewolf dogman thing is just kind of a weird thing to me because I've had people describe to me what a shapeshifter looks like. I've had somebody who was Cherokee see one in broad daylight in the city here in Tulsa. Eventually, I'll tell that story. And there's a few other stories that are tagged with that, but he had seen one and he described it to me as like someone that's really thin with a coat on, like it's like a fur coat. So do with that as you will. Let me see what's Rich's here in New Jersey. We have a lot of Bigfoot, Dogman encounters, not to mention the Jersey Devil. We have a lot of woods in New Jersey, farmland. The Pine Barrens are 1.2 acres. Northwest Jersey in the mountains have over 4,000 acres of protected lands and ton of squatch. Call them the big red eye. Interesting. Dang, I didn't know New Jersey had it like that. Sometimes I always think it's, you know, Oklahoma, Southwest type, swamplands, Southeast, West, Northwest. But yeah, it's kind of a weird topic to talk about, those shifters, man, because it's just I don't know, it just makes me kind of but let's move on for that. Um, let's see here. Okay, so this next story um looks like to be out of Norman. My family has always been Baptist/Methodist or really any kind of Indian church, and so you get an idea of what we generally believe in. And this story is a story before I was born. But my dad and brother lived in Springfield apartment. Dang, I just gave it away. Apartments in Norman. They didn't have a lot, not a lot in the fridge. So my father went to work as usual. He was worried about what they were going to eat for dinner that night, and they didn't have any bread. They only had meat patties in the freezer. He didn't have any money, so he thought he was going to have to eat the meat for dinner. My brother went to school and came back before my father came back from work. When my father came back from work, he checked the cabinet and there was a whole loaf of bread. My dad asked my brother, "Did you go to the store and buy bread?" And my brother looked at him all confused and was like, "No, I just came back from school." At the time, they were so poor that they didn't have any money to even buy bread. My father eventually believed that the Lord had provided us. Whether it's true or not, it's a pretty cool story. My brother still remembers that story uh, to this day. Another weird miracle story. I was like 6 or 7. My mom and dad would help out the homeless if they saw someone struggling. I remember my mom and dad went into a Dollar General and there was a homeless man out front. It was cold that day when they were done shopping. We went to McDonald's, got him a coffee and food, and took it to the homeless man. I think they gave him a couple bucks too. I think like $10. Then a couple days later, my dad took me and my sister to Walmart. Before we entered the Walmart, two friendly men, strangers, approached us. I remember one man wearing a white T-shirt and the other one wearing a green. They both mentioned the homeless man that my parents helped out, and I guess they recognized my dad. They said something along the lines, "We saw you help out that homeless man, and we really appreciate it," and gave him his $10 back and offered to pray with us. So we took hands and prayed in front of the Walmart. After we prayed, we parted ways and never saw them again after. My father believes they were angels, but I don't know. Maybe it was a coincidence. To this day, I still you don't know, but I still remember it. It could have been one of those experiments for the public, but it was days apart. How could they have known? Yeah. That's yeah, that's interesting. And we were conversing back and forth about these stories, and one thing, one thing that I had talked to Patrick Meekin about the homeless, and one thing that I find very interesting, I guess you could say, or something that just kind of makes my mind turn. So when it comes to these homeless people, and with the mental illness, what is to say that maybe they aren't a higher power hanging out to see if someone's going to help them, maybe to like gain faith in humanity. I think about that. That makes my head turn. And I'm not overly religious in terms of like, you know, Baptist, Methodist, all the above, but I always find that kind of interesting. And maybe that one person that you helped out was someone that, was someone in disguise. And when we were talking about these stories, I brought up to mind my mother's story, my mom's story that she had told me. It was a couple, probably 5 years ago, maybe more. But she was outside a convenience store, about a block from my house at the time, and she was hanging out. You know, it was real hot that day, and so she's kind of waited a second to get out of the car, and she headed in. She was real. My mom at the truck that she had. She was real leery about leaving it unlocked. So she was like trying to make sure everything was locked, and because it was one of those manual locks type of trucks, Chevy. And as she's kind of locking stuff, making sure everything's tightened up before she goes into the store. And this is over, I believe, off Yale or Harvard QT. And she gets out, and this man is like, "Hey, I really would like something. Could you help me out? I'd really appreciate it." My mom's like, "Well, I don't have any. I don't, let me break this money, and I can get you something and see what happens." And to my recollection, I remember she goes inside, she gets what she needs to get, and she comes back out, and the man's still sitting there. Because she was thinking when how sometimes with homeless people they be roaming roaming the parking lot, they just be asking anyone, "Hey man, can I get five?" I got dang, not to break the story up, but like one thing that I always kind of get a laugh out of is when they give you that story, like, "Oh man, hey, especially here in Tulsa, they be, hey man, can I borrow $5 to get some gas? My car broke down and I gotta go, and they be giving you like details that you don't really even need. Hey, going over here and uh, car broke down, got like ran out of gas. My car's just right over here. What I'm gonna do is just use that money and, bro, come on, just say you're gonna buy some cigarettes. You ain't gotta play me. You ain't gotta do me like that. Just slide a five and get you some cigarettes or whatever you need to get. But I guess you just have faith in humanity, I suppose. But But anyway, so my mom goes in. She's thinking that he's just roaming the parking lot, so she doesn't really think much about it. And she goes back outside, and he's still sitting there. And she hands him, whatever she needs to hand. I can't remember if it was money or if it was food or whatever it was. I think it was money. But he goes, "Thank you," and he says my mom's name. And my mom kind of was taken aback. She wasn't expecting that, but he had said her name. This homeless man who she don't know who he is, know him from anything. And he's like, "Thank you," and says my mom's name. And she kinda was like, "What? Okay, well, yeah, you have a great day, you stay cool, it's hot, it's hotter than sin out there." But but she gets in the car and she comes back and tells me, and I said, "Man, that might have been higher power coming down to test you, seeing if you really about that, mom." No, my dad's probably hearing that like, "Ah." But, but yeah, no, that story, about the homeless men. That is very interesting, for someone to basically pop up, where you're at, and they come and say, "Hey, here's that money back. We so thank you for helping our friend out." That's really interesting, you know. But if you guys want to come on and share a story, the link is there in the chat. Just scroll up a little bit. Um, get in there, get in here and tell a story, or if you want to add on to a story, or give your thoughts on the stories that I've told so far tonight. Go ahead and jump in. Um, or let me know where you're from too. We got some people in that are viewing. Let me know where you're at where you're from in the chat, and let's keep this thing rolling. This is coming from the same person. This is one of their scary stories, one spooky stories that they had. But it was just my sister and I. And my father was my sister, I, myself, and my father were all watching TV in the living room. My mom had either gone to work or go get groceries. I can't really remember. But it was just the three of us in the house, no one else. And then, bam, the remote fell off, or the remote flies off the arm of the couch where my father and I were sitting. It just flew off the arm of the couch. Nothing, don't know how and it basically hit the wall. My first thought was poltergeist, but I was taught at a very young age is to not be afraid when these things happen. I wasn't afraid of the situation, but I was more surprised to see it happen in my own home. After that surprise happened, we as a family immediately prayed, smudged the house, and nothing else happened after that for a while. Dang, trying to turn the channel, yeah, whatever y'all was watching. No, but no, yeah, there's things like that all the time, that happen to people. But I'm gonna tell some stories here myself here in the last few days. But from the chat, Derek Morris, CO from Tennessee, what's going on, man? Appreciate you. You coming by, man. I know you got to get up at the butt crack of dawn, but I appreciate you coming in. Eventually, I'm going to be having Derek Morris on for a part 3, and I'll do a compilation of his first 2, to get y'all ready, get y'all reminded. But he tells a keen story about uh, basically uh, he had seen this this Bigfoot disappear, like it just disappeared, gone, nowhere to be found, and that's on the Tales from the Trail. He's based out of the Appalachian Trail out of Tennessee. But shout out you, Derek. But here in the last, I'd say probably couple since we moved here, one thing that is very interesting. Or I usually use the word interesting because it just piques my curiosity. But so when we were viewing this house, and I was telling some people this, when we were walking through the house, it still had everyone's stuff in it, like the people's stuff. And um, in the corner of the living room where our lamp sits now, there was a small shrine of some sort. Now, I don't remember what was on the shrine, but there was a picture of some being. And I don't know if it was a person. I can't remember in my mind's eye. But I remember being like, that's kind of odd. That's really kind of strange. Like, and it was just like sitting in the corner, and it was just like candles around it, and there was like a picture. And like I said, I can't remember what was on the picture. And so that kind of made me be like, all right, well, this house that we're now going to live in for probably for a while, we own it. I really start thinking about, okay, this could probably be something, especially if these people are, in their home with a shrine in their house. And that's kind of, to me, that there was something that kind of peaked, and I had some kind of weird reservations about this house that we're living in now. And so as we move in, I'm here trying to get everything situated in Oklahoma City, trying to get stuff situated here, and that's when the weird stuff starts happening, like weird, random kind of occurrences. I'm sitting on the couch and just got done moving some stuff around and trying to get stuff situated, and it sounds like somebody's walking up the steps or like walking around upstairs in the house. And I'm like, what? Okay, like that's weird because we have a cat, and so my thought too. My original first thought was like, okay, well, that's weird. Let me go up there and see if he's up there. Well, as I get up, as I'm going to get up, I look and he's sitting there on the other side of the couch in this in kind of this little blanket that our girls throw blankets on the ground. And I'm like sitting there like, what is going on with this? Okay. That's what type of time we on. We're not even here a week and we already got things going. So I go upstairs and look around. There ain't nobody there. Nothing's going on. And, fast forward a week or two later, and Betsy and I are sitting on the couch and we're kind of watching Survivor or something. And all of a sudden, our girls are asleep. They can't open the doors of their room, but we hear somebody walking up the stairs and into our room. And I'm like, what? And we look at each other like, okay. All right, that's okay. This is something weird. And so then, like on the last episode you guys heard, it sounded like, or it was the door closed of the bathroom. Now I don't know if it was the cat or if it was other forces, but I'm already experiencing creepy stuff, man. So y'all need to stay away. Y'all need to keep away. Derek Morris about to go to bed, bro. Yeah, no problem, man. Um, Let me know if you're in the chat. Say something. Don't be a. Even if you just say hi, just say hi. Um, but I just want to make sure. I want to make sure you got some participation. No, but I'm thinking. I'm thinking when we get to 1,000 subscribers, I think I'm gonna do some sort of giveaway, and I'm trying to think of the rules in my head. I want to do something for people. Maybe do a T-shirt. It's gonna be getting cold in that time. Um, we'll see something. But if we can get to 1,000 subscribers, I'm gonna figure something out, and we're gonna do some. We're gonna do a giveaway, maybe hoodie or hoodies. I don't know yet. But like, share, subscribe, get it out, and then I'll be dropping the rules, and we'll see what happens. But hopefully that'll happen uh, before the 2 year and before 100 episodes. So we'll see. But Derek Morris got to smudge up, man. Literally, yeah. Someone was telling me you need to, like, someone was telling me you need to do that. I'm like, I know. I'm horrific. Things get going, my mind is on other things. Like we had to replace the back door because we had bugs coming in. I was like, everything's hitting us. But since we replaced the back door, man, it's been smooth sailing on the air. I forgot, once you have a little opening in your door, your bills are crazy. AC bills, 100 and something degrees, but yeah, that was weird. And it's been happening periodically when I've been home alone, or when my girls are napping or asleep at night. I'll be sitting here. Uh, I'm getting ready for college football, college football 25. I gotta get my game. Gotta get my game time. I'm about to be a delinquent father because I'm gonna be on that game probably 48 hours straight. Got my coffee ready. I got a week supply of Gatorade. I'm ready. I'm in EA Sports. I'm in the game. But no, but weird things been happening. I've been kind of leery. Like, that's one thing that always makes me nervous about kids and ghosts and things like that. Because my brother, his daughter, so he's living in my grandma. So there'll be a story that I'm gonna be. I'm gonna try to get my papa on here on my mom's side. He's a he's a farmer. What was that? Did y'all hear that? All right, it's getting spooky, but he had an encounter with some type of Sasquatch, maybe type thing, and he had it sounded like a hyena he saw out in Council Hill, Shakota area. But my brother is staying on that property where he saw that some years back, and my great grandmother, I'm not gonna give her name, but they have been seeing her in that house. His oldest daughter has been seeing her in that house and said, "Oh yeah, I've been talking to grandma. I've been talking to grandma at night." I'm like, "What?" I looked at my brother. I said, "You gonna let that go? You gonna let her see those things?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I get." He's like, "I don't." She's not doing nothing. I said, "But but that's one thing I'm leery about when it comes to little kids and ghosts and paranormal activity is because sometimes that's how they get into the family is with them kids because they come, oh, I'm your grandmother, I'm your cousin, or I'm so and so. Your dad knows me, and it's just it's an entity that's trying to get into the family, and that's one thing. I'm getting goosebumps talking about that, but that's one thing that I'm very leery when it comes to little kids and ghosts because of that. Because I've seen the Omen. We all know Damien. Who knows who knows what he can do. Got the spirit of Satan in that young man because he let it rock. But but yeah, like she was saying, he was telling me. I guess I had multiple family members telling me there was like, oh, tell this on your podcast. What about this? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. Like that's creepy. But she'd been seeing him and talking to her and said, oh yeah, she was telling me about this and talking. I'm just like, I don't know about that. I'm not sure. So what y'all gonna do about it? He's like, oh, we'll see. I was like, oh man, Jesus. But she had passed in that house, and there was under some circumstances I won't go into, but it just wasn't a good look. It wasn't for things and for the family, and so he had ended up going to that house, and I was wondering if something was going on there, but a few people have passed in that house. I believe, to my knowledge, I could be wrong, but moving on to our next story. I've been kind of talking in between stories, but the final story of the night, we're almost hitting an hour. We may go a little longer if somebody wants to jump on. If not, we're gonna get off here in a minute. But the final story of the night, and this is a pretty interesting one. This gentleman, has sent me his original story. I'm going to read the original story, and then eventually I'm going to do a follow up because there's more things that I need to flesh out. Um, he has been to that area a few times over the last couple of years and has seen some other kind of weird things going on, such as like he saw a deer carcass that had just I think it was just the liver eaten out, which is interesting. But um, this encounter goes like this. My encounter happened around 2000 or 2001. I wanted to relate an experience my uncle and I had from my childhood. I grew up in a small town called Hamptonville, North Carolina. Some people pass by it on the highway and literally never knew it was there, never existed. It's just a rural farming community. But there is a road about a mile from us where my experience took place. Growing up, I heard different creepy stories about a particular section of the woods on the end of that road. There was a good sized creek that zigzagged through and created a couple swampy areas within it. I overheard a group of girls talking on the bus one day when I was young. One of them was relaying a story about her older sister partying and swimming with a group of friends by the creek. She said she saw a figure in the woods that she called the devil. They hightailed it out of there and out of there after they saw the figure. Fast forward a couple years later, I was probably 11 or 12, and my uncle Frank would visit from Boone during the summer to fish and hunt with my dad and vice versa. Well, one particular summer, we had started fishing on that road. About a half mile down, there was a small bridge. Uh, on the small bridge, jeez, on the path on the right hand side of the road that would lead to one end of the creek. The path was inaccessible by vehicle, so you had to walk about a mile down to get to that particular area. One time, my father and uncle and I had went fishing there, probably around lunchtime. My uncle pointed something out after we parked the truck at the beginning of the path that was underneath the small bridge. It was a blue tick coonhound hunting dog laying dead in the creek, and its stomach had been eaten out. The rest of him was virtually untouched. My dad and I owned coon dogs and hunted regularly at this point in time. And they can be very expensive, and most hunters don't let them just roam around when they aren't hunting, unless he was lost from a hunt. Maybe the owner couldn't locate him. There wasn't a house for probably another mile or two up the road from that particular spot. It was very odd, is kind of what we all thought. Well, a couple weeks later, my uncle had come down and wanted to fish that area once again. My dad was busy, and I told him I wanted to tag along. It was probably around 4:30, 5 o'clock when we headed out. We parked his old black Ford pickup, grabbed our fishing gear, and started our hike in. That that area always gave me the creeps, and not just the stories or the dog that we had found, but just the looks and vibes of the area was super ominous. Heavily forested on both sides of the path, all the way down to the fishing spot. That evening, we had fairly decent luck and stayed until it was dark. I hated the idea of walking back in the pitch darkness. We didn't think to bring a flashlight because we hadn't intended on staying that long. As we started up the path, we began to hear on the right side of us in the woods a raccoon screaming. I knew the sound well because like I said, I had coon hunted a lot with my dad. Well, the screaming got extremely close to us, and then it got really far away from us really rapidly. At first, we thought it was two different ones screaming, and then realized what was going on. We could hear leaves and branches being smacked towards the top of the trees when the screaming was near, and we could still hear it, but not as loud when it was farther away. Something was throwing the raccoon into something, and it would catch and throw it back. I've been in the woods my whole life and coon hunted as well as deer hunted since I could walk, and I've never heard anything like this before. Coons are stealthy and can move quickly, but this thing was being thrown over the treetops, like 40, 50 feet higher in the air. What could possibly what could possibly throw this thing pitch black darkness with several trees surrounding and see that good enough to catch it? Now his answer is it's Sasquatch. Now my dad and uncle had grew up in the mountains of Boone, North Carolina, hunting, fishing their entire lives, and they knew the woods and its inhabitants very well. I've never seen my uncle Frank scared a day in his life until that night. He said hairs on his arms were sticking straight up from the goosebumps he had. He said I wish I wouldn't have left my pistol locked in the damn truck. He kept repeating, "What in the hell is that?" As we got to the truck, finally the raccoon let out one last ungodly shriek, and everything in the forest grew silent. No crickets, no living things, nothing in the woods was making a peep. We drove back to the house and told my dad about the encounter. My uncle mentioned that what if whatever killed the dog had a hand in what we experienced that night. If you look on the BFRO website, look for reports in Yadkin County, you will find two. One of which is from a former music teacher in elementary school who encountered a white colored Bigfoot when he was a child in Hamptonville, probably 4 to 5 miles from this road. Man, I didn't know I could read that long, y'all. I had no idea I had it in me. But man, that's a interesting, because raccoons are pretty little fierce creatures. They're pretty mean. And for, him to basically have these things like whatever this was, throw this raccoon and kind of like playing ball with it, is interesting, is pretty crazy. You know. I haven't heard much about, them in terms of like killing and taking certain parts. Now, I have heard that in cattle mutilation, and there have been a few cattle mutilations here in Oklahoma. Eventually, I'll get to that topic too. That's another deep dive. But for them to take a specific organ, to me is very interesting. And if you guys have any theories, let me know because that is very very interesting. Especially when it comes to Bigfoot, or even maybe that might be a werewolf or dogman or whatever it could be. But one thing about to me about Bigfoot that I just don't know how to quantify it in terms of like how to say it, like what I think it is. I've been quoted on other podcasts saying that it's a type of tribe or type of clan, and people always assume that I'm saying human. And it's not really what I'm trying to say. I'll get to the point of saying it like how I want to say it. But what my thought is I think that there's some type of hint of human in that, or some type of intelligent being inside that brain. I was harking back, and I always use this example when I talk to people about Bigfoot. Is it's been on record through oral history. You know, Chito Harjo, when he's messing around in Honeycomb Bluff and Eufaula, around that area, that he was taught how to do those things, and he had used that at Honeycomb Bluff to evade, uh, I guess you could say, the prohibition, federal agents, and there's this level of intelligence that's more than just a monkey. Now, we all seen Planet of the Apes. I've done a review over it. I don't know if it's that level, but I think it's enough to where they know how to take care of themselves. They know how to do the old ways. From the root, of the plant, using different types of plants to fix certain things, or excuse me, to not infect certain things too. And that's one thing about that. And I always have non-natives being like, "Oh, well, are you saying they're using magic?" And I'm like, "Well, maybe, yeah, but like, the cloaking thing always comes up. Like, how did I see it and it stepped over and it's gone? Yeah, it could be camouflage, but I think also too, I think it's they know things. They know how to navigate through their living room, essentially. Like, not saying that I'm sitting on my couch and I'm like a chameleon, but like in a sense of they know exactly where to go if they see something they don't know. But also too, I also think too that they know things. I always say medicine, and medicine is used in a lot of different ways. I always hear people say, "Oh yeah, they're using practice of medicine. They know things," or like, "Oh, that's that bad medicine. Oh, you're on bad medicine." Things like that. But maybe that's true. And also, I have another theory that like people always assume, "Oh, natives. If you're native, you look native and this and this. You must know the old ways." And my thought is, I look at different tribal nations, and I look at Bigfoot as similar when it comes to their ways. I believe that over time, through with natives, well, I know over time, we have had things taken away from us. We've been essentially bred out in some family lines. More white people, trying to, Europeans or colonists, marrying in, and you lose the original ways in certain family lines, family lineages. And that's kind of what my thought is about Bigfoot, is that I think that there are some clans that know things. Matt Sieber from East Tennessee Bigfoot had his crew have an encounter with one of these Bigfoot that was messing with the technology. And a crazy story that I have that it made me think when he told that story was I was out at my grandma at her headstone, and I had just bought my parents for Christmas, or Christmas or one of those holidays, had bought me a camera phone, like a brand new phone. Like I said, I might have been in college still, for Christmas or some one of those holidays. And when I went to take a picture, it was blurry of her headstone. You know, in the areas around her headstones, it was blurry. So then we go back to I go to take another picture of something else, and it wasn't blurry anymore. And I'm like, Dad, I don't know what's going on with my camera. And I remember telling him that. Now, I don't know, it could have been the camera. I don't know. But hearing that reminded me of, when Matt was telling that story about his people getting their stuff messed with. she knew things, and like I said, I think that clan that they were running into in that area knew things, and so it's hard to quantify. It's hard to like communicate that thought to people who believe that Bigfoot is flesh and blood, or Bigfoot is interdimensional, or Bigfoot is this, that, the other. And that's like the divisiveness that I absolutely can't stand about the Bigfoot community because everyone thinks they know everything. I'm just giving my theory because I'm just like, that's very interesting because I've heard different things that fit with in the way that I see things in my head. Because I think of, like I said, medicine's always passed down in the family. It's not given to someone else outside the family and then they start it. Oops. They started. But it always it always trickles down into the family. So once that person stops doing it or doesn't want to do it, it's over. Like it doesn't, unless they have permission to teach or however it shakes out. But I don't know. It's an interesting thought, but we're at an hour and 15. So this is creepy part 6. For those of you guys who joined me on the live, I appreciate you. And um, I'm going to be pumping out. So number 7 won't come out until New Year's Day, 2025. So we got 6 months or whatever. No, it's not 6 months. However 4 months, whatever we got left until I think it is 4 months. Come on now. That Woodall math, 1 plus 1, 2 maybe. And then I took a little Terrence Howard online class. And so one times 1 is 2. Anyways. But yeah, if you got any stories or anything that you want to share for part 7, please reach out to me. Yehola Tiger, Facebook. Send me a message. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I don't want to leave anybody hanging for a year. I think I have left a few people hanging for a year, and I apologize. But sometimes things happen when I'm trying to text, and then whatever. And if you don't feel comfortable on Facebook or you don't have Facebook, Real Warcry Pod at gmail.com, and then TikTok, Warcry Pod. I post videos, I post excerpts of episodes. Definitely go and check that out. Like, share, subscribe, help the channel out. Like I said, once we get to 1K, thinking about doing a giveaway. We'll see what happens. It'll be kind of winter time, so might do hoodies or long sleeves, something fun. May have y'all do like a sharing contest or something. I don't know. We'll see. But this is Creepy Part 6. I appreciate everyone, and I'll catch you on the next one.